Where were you when that was going down? And I just sat alone and quiet for a while. He does not see what's going on. And I had this vision of him weeping while things were happening to me, not just over my innocence being stolen from me at that age, but also for the person perpetrating that against me because they were so controlled by their sinful behavior. The shame that came with the infertility is just, it's that sitting in church on Mother's Day and everybody in the building stands up showing that they're a mother, but you.
Oh,
We never took in fosters because I knew I could lose them.
our
I just knew my heart. I just knew because I didn't have my own already, the idea of taking them in and then having to let them go. I just knew I couldn't do it.
It is the Kingdom Wife Mom Boss podcast.
So why would I walk away if God said I can handle it? If He has endowed me with dunamis power that lives in me, how can I live defeated?
But one of the things that I realized was that I'm a person too.
You're in the wilderness and you don't even realize it. And so now we walk around with the spirit of offense and unforgiveness and anger and bitterness. And God has to get that stuff off of us first.
Thriving Decrees for the Kingdom Wife Mom Boss is not just a book, but it is a power tool made for the leader in you as a wife, as a mother, as a business entrepreneur, and as a minister. Whatever is inside of us, it pours out of us in our leadership. And so this book was curated to ensure that the very best of you is what is being poured out. It was created to help you heal, overcome, and conquer everything that tries to hold you down from being the thriving leader that you were created to be. Make sure you go to my website at www.clemitradeshay.com and order your copy.
Hey, Kingdom Wife Mom Boss. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of the Kingdom Wife Mom Boss podcast. I tell you what, I am getting super excited about these guests that we are having on. And today I have an amazing guest, and she has an amazing story, powerful tools and nuggets to just share with you guys. And so I'm grateful to have her on. I'm going to ask her to go ahead and introduce herself. How are you doing, Miss Lisa?
I'm really good. I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad we finally made this work.
Yes.
I've spent all my days trying to make stuff work, but God worked it out for us today. I'm excited about it. So, my name is Lisa Schafer. I am the founder of Christian Drama Queen Solutions, which is a business that I set up to be pretty much a Naomi to Ruth ministry, whether it's dealing with infertility or going through the process of adoption, whether it's dealing with addictions or home educating kids or just being a better organizer or just dealing with trauma in the past. That's what Christian Drama Queen Solutions does because I am the original Christian Drama Queen. And I am her. And so I try to, the bulk of my ministry right now is really what the Lord called me to do a few years ago. And that was sharing this process of finding the freedom to forgive those that have harmed me over the course of the last 60 years. And so that has been probably the biggest challenge for me. And I kind of find it to be the biggest challenge for others is learning how to forgive the most unforgivable things. And God commands us to do it. So I equip other women through my own journey and the processes that I've gone through to do that because I believe that He would not command us to forgive those that are so hard to forgive if He wasn't going to give us a way to do it. And so that's where the calling has been for the last several years is working with people who need to find a way to forgive. So
Amen. I love how God takes our mess and makes it into a message. It's just so beautiful. And I love the analogy that you use there of just a mentorship of helping those who are, needing help because it's a hard journey, a lot of the things that we experience. And sometimes shame can make us want to face it alone or just
and
all of the things that make us.
and I'll tell you what I discovered was I was having so much trouble in all of these areas of life, whether it was being more organized or homeschooling kids or going through the adoption process or dealing with my own shame through my infertility, all of the stuff that I was dealing with, the addictions, all of that for years was connected to my inability to be free. And I wasn't free because I couldn't forgive. And so now what I'm finding is that I can help a mom who needs help with organization. But what I'm finding is that when we get down to it, she struggles with that because she's got an imperfection issue. And that's linked to trauma from her childhood most of the time. So it just does kind of kind of find that things that get all connected at some point in time. So,
It sounds like a layering work. Like, let's remove these layers to find out what's going on underneath
yep.
there. And that's absolutely beautiful. So, we're going to talk about a few things on this episode. And I know one of the things that I wanted to start with was your adoption process, as far as your infertility and your adoption and your journey along that way. If you want to just fill us in and share with us that
Um,
journey.
yeah, I'll tell you something. God's shown himself to be a genuine father to me through our own process of trying to be parents. And when we got married, we didn't really think there'd be any reason why we wouldn't be able to have our own children. But about 3 or 4 years in, we realized we weren't doing anything to prevent it, and I was not conceiving. So we went through all of the things that infertile couples tend to do. We did the testing and the medications and all of that stuff. We didn't have a lot of money, and insurance doesn't cover that. So we didn't try to do in vitro or any of those things, but we were still doing a lot of the things that people were saying, okay, you know, less stress, eating right, counting days, all of that stuff. And it just was not happening. So we decided after about 6 years of trying to bear our own children that the Lord was calling us to adopt. And the way that that happens is, and most social workers or attorneys that you're working with to adopt in Kansas, which is where I live, there's a multitude of ways to adopt children. You can go through foster care system, you can go through agencies, or there are private adoptions that allow you to kind of pick and choose the situation that you're willing to take on because your finances can or cannot hold, the I could not spend $50,000 on an adoption, but I could probably spend five. And so I was able to make myself available to moms who needed just that kind of family to adopt their child. And so it's a fascinating process linked with all kinds of emotions. Some birth families need a lot more financial assistance, and some do not. They still live with parents and they've got insurance through their parents' work, or they don't need us to support them. And we ended up adopting three children, and we lost four through the adoption processes that did not go through. Oddly enough, now, we've already talked about me being so incredibly pale on camera. Uh, all
Lisa.
all of my children are mixed race or African American, and their families picked us, and we are embarrassingly Caucasian. And so, what's interesting to me about that is that forced us to go through. God love us, forced us to go through a lot of racial things we would not have ever gone through or dealt with or addressed or thought needed to be addressed. And what it did was it made us incredibly, we had to love each other differently because the families around us didn't look like us. And so we had to be very vocal about how much we love each other, regardless of situation or color or whatever. It was just it went differently. All of the placements that we lost were Caucasian. All of the placements that came through, God selected, and we are interracial. And so that to me means he intends for us to address that. And he equipped us, and I've got three beautiful children with their own issues, and we won't be able to talk about a lot of those just because it's their story. But we have all dealt with abandonment. I, from my own father, abandoning me, and adopted children. I don't care how much you love them and how long you have them, they will always wonder why they got given away. And it may be a fantastic love story. Their being given to me was a fantastic love story, all three of them. But they will still wonder why. And they have to have permission to feel that. And I didn't realize till I was struggling through my own abandonment issues that they had them too. And we were able to talk about that then all of a sudden. And they, now they're adults, all three of them adults. So the shame that came with the infertility is just, it's that sitting in church on Mother's Day and everybody in the building stands up showing that they're a mother, but you.
Oh
It
man, Lisa.
it's that being in church when the other two infertile mothers finally say they're pregnant, and you're the only one that can't stand up and say you're pregnant. Um, and being in the spotlight when that happens, because as soon as my friend Dawn announces that she's pregnant, everybody looks at me because we were in the same boat trying to get pregnant, and it happened to her first. And I didn't have any warning, and it's a hard spotlight to sit in and put on a smile and be happy, and because you are happy for them. I mean, I'm not a jerk. I was really happy for her and her situation. Um, but we never conceived, and we never got to make that announcement in church. And I never will. I'm 61, and barring any Abraham situations where Sarah conceived at such a late age, I'm probably not going to get pregnant at this point. And I still struggle with that sometimes because
I was gonna ask you, does that still bother you?
I think I think I'll always wonder what a baby would look like if it looked like me and my husband. I think I'll always wonder if I would have been a different kind of mother to a birth child than I am to an adoptive child. I mean, I can say I wouldn't have been because I love my babies as my babies. I'm just saying I love my babies. I don't care how adult they get; they're still mine. But I think there's a part of me that wonders if I would have been a different parent to a child that came out of me. I don't know. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm not going to act like I know for sure because I don't know for sure. But I'd like to think I would have been just as loving and no different. But I don't know. I don't know.
That's fair.
So, but there's just a lot of grief that comes with the waiting on a child. You ask the Lord why a lot, why them and not us? Is it about me? Is there a reason why I shouldn't be a mother? Um, is it too much to ask that I parent because other mothers get to parent and carry their own children and go through that process?
All right,
Um,
now we just not getting
we gonna
into this
be
dang on episode, ma'am.
we're gonna start weeping, do a little weeping.
Because you
Um,
add that on top of everything else that has been experienced in
mhm,
life, and it just further adds
mhm,
to a level of feeling rejection.
mhm.
And I mean, you can compare that to a lot of other things. I don't
Sure.
think there's anything as heavy as like wanting to be a mother and not being able to conceive a child.
Right.
But there are some times in life where we see that other people have like certain things, not necessarily material objects, but like I used to look at the relationship that people had with God and the things that they were able to do, and I used to be in a spot where I feel like, okay, God doesn't want me close to him
Yeah. Is
because
he
he won't
blessing them
let
more than me?
yeah
Yes.
yeah
Why are we blessing them more than we're blessing me? Right.
yeah. Well, for me, it was the relationship. It was like, God, I'm seeking you. I'm trying to
Mhm.
know you. I'm trying to hear you, and I'm trying to get there. And for me in that moment, it was just like, you know what, Lord, you just don't want me like to be close. Like
Mhm.
you want this person to be close to you, but you are not feeling me the way that you are feeling them,
Mhm.
and it added to a level of rejection. And now that's not as deep as just saying that you wanted to have a child and you couldn't conceive, but it's just another level of
Right.
feeling like God is rejecting you in something.
And I will tell you that, when I was going through that process, the infertility stuff, and then losing babies. Babies would come that we were adopting, and then they'd be taken, and then
So were
babies
you
would
a
come.
foster home? I wanted to.
No, no. In the
Okay.
state, so here's what happens in the state of Kansas. And I love this because it's probably easier to adopt in Kansas than almost any other state, in that you can have an attorney represent the birth family as well as the adoptive family, as long as they both agree to that. Now, if the birth child is in another state, then you have to have representation for the birth family in the other state. And you have to go through interstate compact before you can transfer that child from one state to another, which is a long, laborious process that makes women cry. It's just crazy waiting. It's crazy waiting is what it is. But but in the state of Kansas, you can decide how you want to get into the adoption process. And so we met with an attorney who was, in fact, he had adopted, and that's the reason he became an adoption attorney, because it was such a nobody specializing in it kind of thing. And he decided to be the man. He just recently passed away, and we adopted all three of our children through him. He was a great guy. But anyway, we went through the process very simply. You go to him and you say, these, we fill out a questionnaire. These are the things that we can do. We can handle a child with some special needs. We can handle a child that's been diagnosed with heart problems. We can handle a child that is oh, what's the term I'm looking for? Maybe has some mental retardation or something like that. You can pick and choose special needs of any kind. You can pick and choose what you feel like in your heart you can handle or deal with. And so we fill out that form, and then when women come to him and say, "Okay, I need to have a baby, and I want to give it up for adoption," he will show all. He'll have her fill out a similar questionnaire, and then he can pull all of the files that fall into the categories that she wants to look at. So in two situations, we were so I don't in two situations they selected us and did not. One of them did not want to see us, and the other one did. And then the third one, she selected us without seeing anything about us except a little photo album. She didn't even see the things that we were willing to accept or not accept, whatever. And she just said, "The Lord told me that you were his mom, and that's why I picked you guys." So it's it puts a lot more control in the hands of the biological mother, and I like that because I wanted her to always feel comfortable about who she was selecting and to know what she wanted to know about us. So we were very open with that. Not all and not all birth mothers want to be that open. They just very simply say, "I want to make sure that it's a doctor and a teacher that raised my kid," and they pick those families to go through the process with. Um, and so it was way different than if you were to go through, the years long process of fostering and then a decision being made that you would allow you to adopt that child. Because the state of Kansas with foster cares, their primary job is to try to put families back together as best that they can, which we completely agree with, as long as it's in the best interest of the child. So we never took in fosters because I knew I could lose them.
I
I
hear a
I
lot of
just
people say that is a hard part.
I just knew my heart. I just knew because I didn't have my own already, the idea of taking them in and then having to let them go. I just knew I couldn't do it over and over and over. And God love people who do. I don't know how they do that. I think it's a special calling. I really do.
Mhm.
But we did take what were considered hard cases. Two of my children, their birth mothers claimed to have been raped. And so they chose to give those babies up for adoption instead of aborting them. We had one whose birth mother had been alcoholic and abusing drugs throughout the pregnancy. So we were under the assumption that the child was probably going to come out with some mental health or physical health problems. They did not. And so there were just a lot of, so we just, all of their situations were very different. And we just opened up our heart and said, we never, my husband is about one quarter Cherokee and then three quarters German. Yeah. So we had multi-ethnic upbringings to an extent. I was the
Mhm.
minority in my school when I was in elementary school. So, which was fantastic because my parents and grandparents made sure that we were never raised with the idea of race being a consideration. And so it never was. And so when we were ready, we were just ready and we let them choose us. We just let families choose us. And so, and my babies are very pretty, but that's a whole nother podcast. We can talk about that another time. Not that I'm, not that I'm, think they're special or anything. But the process the babies that you lose are babies that, for example, one gal selected us and she had problems with housing. So she moved in with us and we helped her deliver the son that she was planning to give to us. And we left the hospital empty-handed after she had lived with us for about 3 months because she hit her the birth father showed up with his army of families saying that they would support her all of a sudden. And so she felt like she could do it and have support. The hardest part about that is knowing what happened to that child after she kept him and the years of trauma that he went through,
Oh my goodness.
because they were families that knew us and that's why they picked us and stuff. So, in another case, we had, and what was really hard is she had another child with her that she already had that was two. I potty trained that child. I took care of that child every day while she went through her pregnancy and just loved and loved and loved on him. He did not have a lot of family that was doing that. And so we not only lost her and the baby she gave birth to, but we kind of lost the baby she'd already had that was living with us. So, so that's why I know what I know about being able to do foster care. I just know,
Yeah.
I just know I couldn't do it, right? So, and then, we had a couple that could not make the decision. They came to us days before they gave birth and said, "I'm just telling you, I can't sign those papers." And there's nothing you can do about that. You just and you understand that that's a risk that you're going to be taking as you go through the process. Sometimes funds are at risk when you go through the process. One of our birth mothers lived with her three other children and her mother had been raising the other three children. She just told her, "I'm not raising another one of your kids." But they needed things like a stove, and their heat was cut off, and there were some things that happened because they were living in poverty, and we kind of, helped a little bit to make sure that they were taken care of and warm and had a place to cook. And we wanted her to be healthy. She was pregnant and carrying our child, right? So, and so, every situation, but in Kansas, if you're not in a state that you can do private adoptions through an attorney, and get to pick and choose the situation, move to a different state because we could not have done it with we wouldn't have had any children if it had been forced upon us to do, $50,000 with some agency through a church organization or something like that.
So you're going through this whole process while you're still trying to conceive.
We had made the decision that we were not going to do anything to prevent conception, but we weren't going to do anything to force it. And so by the time we'd been through 6 years of infertility and all those doctor's appointments and disappointment after disappointment, I mean, you can only take a pregnancy test so many times before it starts to wreak havoc in your mental capacity. You start to become pretty emotional every single time. And so we just decided not to try not to and not to try to. And we would start the adoption process. And that's why and basically what we did is just made sure our attorney knew we were always available. So we ended up with a baby in 92, a baby in 94, and a baby in 98. So, and now they're all adults. And like I said, we've never prevented it. So I mean, I'm not saying the Lord might not put me in a Sarah situation. I suppose it could happen. I'm kind of hoping it doesn't at this point, but I wouldn't say no if it did. So
You are cracking me up with this Sarah situation.
I'm just saying,
So
I'm just
hilarious.
trying to be open about the possibility, but not, I'm not thinking it's going to happen. Just saying. So I'm
So
just
were your
saying.
adoptions closed adoptions, open adoptions? Do they know who their parents
Our
are?
first, our first one was open, and we let her. She called us when he was probably about 5, and he had always known he was adopted. We had explained that to him over and over, and she talked to him on the phone, and he told her that when he's 5, I don't know how much he understood about what he was saying, but I think maybe he had thought about it a little bit. And he's just told her, thank you for letting him live. And he wanted to meet her someday. And she said someday when it was easier, she would make sure that she met him. And sure enough, when he was about 17, they got together and spent a weekend together. And he went to Kansas City to visit her and has other siblings. And so that was extremely open. The second case was closed. Now, when you get a closed adoption, you're not supposed to see things like medical records or billing or any of that. We accidentally got sent a bill with a birth mother's name on it for post-pregnancy birth control, which we did not pay, but we did let our attorney know, look, we know who she is, so you might want to let her know that it was disclosed in paperwork to us accidentally. And then, of course, he reamed out the doctor's office and said, "You guys weren't supposed to do that." So that one was closed. That was my daughter's birth mother, and there has never been any contact as far as I know. Now, my daughter lives in another state, and she might not tell me if she had made contact. Um, just because, and I've always told her that's really up to her. That's a very private thing for her, and if she feels like it's necessary, then I'm not opposed to that. I think that just like I needed to track down my birth father and get some sort of a closure with him and go through the process of realizing it was probably a good thing for him not to be a part of my life all of those years. I would expect that my kids want to do something similar, have some sort of conversation that includes, why didn't I get to stay with you? Or why wouldn't you let me stay with you? Then my third has had completely open situation. He knows his brothers and sisters, biological brothers and sisters, and he knows his birth mother. So, and he's younger. He's 20, so he'd be like 27, I think now, or 27. So that's a little bit, that's harder for me, only because I know too much about things that go on in that side of the family that forced him to be given up for adoption, and I don't want him to get hurt, you know. So, but he knows that, and he's an adult, so they're all different. It's very, very different situations, but man, um, I I see so much of the Lord working things out in their lives to make us their parents. It's fascinating to me. Things like timing, when we lost a baby on January 28th, I knew in my heart of hearts that exactly 9 months later, there could be a baby born that would come home with us. And sure enough, my third one was born on October 28th, exactly 9 months to the day after we lost one. And just like uh, my second born, we lost a baby in February. That placement was canceled, and we decided, by
I
that
was
I mean
gonna
not
say, when you're
biologically.
saying losting, you're
Lost.
saying the
We lost
foster.
a
Okay.
placement. I should say
Placement.
placement. Yep, yep. So we lost a placement in February, and I could not tear the baby's room down. Just left it up, left the door closed, and cried a lot for about 4 months. And then we made the decision to tear everything down in the nursery and put it out in the garage and move our room into the nursery room so it'd be right next door to the 2-year-old the firstborn. And then the next day got a call from our attorney saying, "Hey, there's a baby at the hospital. Do you want her?" And we were like, we just put everything out in the garage. And I looked at my husband and I said, God's just funny. That's just funny. So we had to bring everything. So we, of course, and I'm not going to say no. I remember the attorney saying, now, to my husband, now talk this over with Lisa. And my husband was like, talk over what? We're not, we never say no.
Yeah.
So then I
Yeah.
had a girl, then I had a baby girl, and she was a surprise. We weren't planning on her. We had lost a placement just a few months earlier and put the stuff away, and we were happy. Had our little Christopher. He was adorable, but there, all of a sudden, there she was. So,
Such an amazing point to talk about. You said, you don't care who you are. If you've been adopted, you're wondering why
hmm
someone doesn't want you.
hmm
And you said that, around this time you're discovering you have your own abandonment issues.
yeah,
And the beauty in that is the transparency that you got to have with your kids about, hey, I've been feeling this too, and this is what I've experienced and what I've gone through.
yeah,
And I've learned as a mother that transparency of just saying, I'm asking you not to do this, or I'm asking you to be this way because I struggle with it and I
right.
had to overcome it. It really does help them heal, and it builds the relationship bond a little more.
Well, and I really think too, and I, now that they're older, they have come to me and said, I remember when I was such and such an age. And I felt like you were giving too much attention to this other one, and it just kind of reminded me that nobody wanted me. And I would say, obviously I don't want you to feel that way. Why do you think you felt that way? Well, now looking back, I don't think it was you. It was just the whole idea that it might be I'm not wanted as much as another one is because I'm not wanted by my biological parents. There's a lot of, and this is kind of off topic, so I don't know why the Lord's bringing it to mind. There's so much pain and suffering in the lives of these women that give birth to these babies it's not that they're not wanted. And I've told my children several times, I've talked to these birth mothers, not the second one, but the first and third. I've spoken to them. They want you. They do want you. But they have other people in their lives that are telling them they can't do it or they have other people in their lives that are telling them, don't you dare do it because, I'm the boyfriend and that's the product of another relationship. So I don't want you having that baby. Or, whatever the situation is. And these women have a really difficult decision to make. I am obnoxiously pro-life because I've seen the lives of my children after the decision was made for them to live. But I completely sympathize with women having to make that decision and being in a position where people have not said, I will help you, or this child will have value, or let me help you make this decision without putting pressure on you to do it my way. I completely feel like compassion needs to be seen on both sides of that topic, and a lot of times it's not. But I've seen these women make these decisions, and it's even the ones that were assaulted and decided to give birth. That was a very painful thing to decide to do, and so selfless. But
From a Christian standpoint, I do completely understand, but I will tell you, I asked God, I said, God, these women who are
Mhm,
getting assaulted, are
mhm.
they supposed to just like that
How do you do
be
that?
the most
Yes.
painful thing? And
I
I won't share the answer that he gave me because I'm not entirely sure everybody can
Well,
deal with that
let me tell you
answer.
what, I'll tell you what
But
my experience was with a mother that actually had gone through that. I asked her when my oldest was 6. I asked her, I get asked this all the time. You went through an assault and then decided to give birth. And I remember the conversations we had while you were pregnant. They were not pro give birth. It was just that she couldn't afford to do anything else. So so I asked her, I said, they asked me, how did you feel about that when you finally made the decision to give birth? And she said to me, you know, before he was born, all I saw was the assault. But after he was born, I could see his face and it didn't hurt anymore. It was like it completely replaced the violence that I had experienced. It was that turning mourning into dancing for her.
yeah.
And I hope that it always happens that way. And I think God does say, he talks about the pains of childbirth and you forget all of that,
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know. I don't know for everybody, but I do know that for her, it was healing. And I'd like to think that's how God would work. It would be more
Yeah.
healing.
One of the things that he was speaking to me was essentially just, letting a woman know that it's not their fault. A lot of women believe that it is their
Mhm.
fault, the things that are going on. And to me, that's a healing aspect of just knowing that
Mhm.
it's not your fault. I mean, it's just not your fault. And not that you're a bad person or you deserved it because you're not a bad person and you don't deserve it. But there is a lot of evil out,
There is a
a
lot of
lot
people
of
out
evil
there.
out in the world. And
There
so
is.
that's a hard
Mhm.
topic
It
to
is.
navigate.
And like I said, I try really hard to make sure that people know where I stand, like I said, and I use the word obnoxious because if we have a conversation about it, I'm going to very lovingly always be pro-life. However, without compassion for people who don't feel the way that I feel,
Right,
I'll have absolutely no power to give them healing or help
right,
or walk them through anything else. I won't be able to be someone they can count on because I'm going to love them no matter what their decision is. And that
right.
needs to happen, in my opinion. That needs to happen. And I'm quite sure that some, pew hopping, more conservative than me person is going to, call me a blasphemer or something crazy. But I just know when the conversations I've had with the Lord about this have been full of compassion and genuine concern and not just, my way or the highway. I don't think that that's effective. I don't think that, and like I
I
said,
have to question your character and your fruit if you automatically was just
right.
like one way in that and not considering the fact that somebody has suffered.
I think that it has to be dealt with with the way that my heart is with God and the way their heart is with
Yeah,
God. And that's between him
absolutely.
and them. And
Absolutely.
my hope is to always go, he's a father that loves you. And the only reason I know that is because I spent a whole lot of time arguing about the fact that he did. I didn't think he did. Me, you know. Um,
But what you
but
get is these nuts
yeah,
on
well, and
social
that's,
media who are like, kill the baby. And I mean, you get
yeah, it's
these
crazy.
crazy things. And I feel like it really alters the way that people see it and they don't see it through the eyes of God or through the eyes of compassion
I
in certain
loved
situations.
I love what Vodi Bokum said about the whole of the law in the Old Testament was to love God and love people.
Hmm.
All the rules, all the regulations, all of the following the laws, all of that stuff. Your job is to love God and love people.
And love with people.
And his spirit is what draws them to him.
Yeah.
But if they'll see that in me, I think it's probably an easier job
Yeah.
than it
It's
would
the
be
hopelessness.
if I was
It's
just
the
offering nothing but anger and resentment and rage and thinking I know all the answers and lacked compassion. And God may, slap me on the wrist someday. I don't
No,
and say,
I
no, that's
think
not
a
what I
lot
want to
of
do.
times
But a
people
lot of
haven't
times,
been through enough. They
right.
haven't been
They
through enough
haven't
to
been
know
through
that there
enough
is a place of hopelessness that you feel like you're
that
never going to overcome this thing. You're never going to get over it.
and you
And so you
can't
just make the
explain it if
decision.
you've not been through it. You
Yeah.
cannot explain it if you've not been through it. And I will never presume to know what the heart of someone else is going through. I just
Yeah.
can't. I just don't feel like that's what God's called me to do. Now, with that being said, I teach a lot about in my studies and when I do freedom facilitation for other people, I do talk a lot about choices that people make, but it never leaves God out
Amen.
because he's eternal and he knows those decisions are coming and he's on the other side of them because he's eternal. So you have to talk about those bad decisions, whether they're mine or someone's bad decisions perpetrated against me. You have to discuss the idea that God knows their heart. And sadly for us sometimes, because it's hard for us to understand, he has the same love for the people that hurt me as he does for me. And
Mhm.
that is difficult to
That is why
communicate.
forgiveness is so hard.
That is why forgiveness is so hard because we
That
can't
is why
imagine.
forgiveness is so hard.
You can't,
Yeah.
how does Jesus say from the cross to forgive them? They know not what they do.
They don't know
How
what
does
they do.
he's bleeding, he's injured, he's been whipped and beaten mercilessly, he's innocent and still being abused to the point of
Mhm.
death, and says, Father, forgive them. They
I
just don't know
know.
what they're doing. I
I
mean,
told my husband, I said
it's
that is
deep.
yeah, unforgiveness is so heavy because this person did something to this person murdered your family or hurt your family in some kind of way, and they went to jail, and now they're out, and now they're saved and they're living for
Hmm.
the Lord, but in your heart, you're still holding on
Hmm.
to the offense. And it's
Hmm.
really hard to let go of that offense and forgive that person. And I'm not saying I don't understand it, I completely understand it, but it takes a level of getting to the point where you want to do nothing but please God, please the
Exactly.
Father, that you will forgive someone for that. So,
And it also takes understanding his nature
yeah.
when it comes to loving the way he loves
Hmm.
and wanting us the way he wants us.
Hmm.
Understanding that he will always desire fellowship with
Hmm.
us and that it's the hard part, but the only way you can get to the place where you can see yourself forgiving someone else is when you understand how God views them, no matter what they've done. And so, if you can get to the place where you understand the character of God because you know these things about being unloved and unwanted and then uncherished or unseen and unprotected, if you can get, which is all the chapters in my books, if you can get to the place where you're at the end and you can see those people through God's eyes because you're now walking in closer fellowship with Him, it changes your perspective of your perpetrator. It changes the way you think of them. My opinion at this point is, and I was molested when I was about 4 years old several times, and it was the same perpetrator. And for the longest time, I was really angry at God for letting that happen. And when I got to the place where I was actually having a conversation with him about it, and I finally said, okay, I know you love me and I know you want me. And I've gone through all of these things, all the scripture that tells me that. I'm finally at the place, took me a long time, finally at the place where I realize this stuff is all true that you say about me and that you're a God of love. Where were you when that was going down? And I just sat alone and quiet for a while. And he gave me, I don't like to call it a vision, but I really prefer to think of it more as just an explanation. He was there because I had to accept the truth that he is everywhere. He does not see what's going on. And I had this vision of him weeping while things were happening to me, not just over my innocence being stolen from me at that age, but also for the person perpetrating that against me because they were so controlled by their sinful behavior. And he had died so that I would not have to suffer and so that my perpetrator would not have to suffer. And so when I realized there was the slightest possibility that maybe sometime down the road, my perpetrator sat in a church somewhere during a spirit filled invitation and God was drawing him forward. If my face flashed across his memories of sin and that drew him closer to the cross, can I be okay with that? Because it ain't about me anymore. It has to be about him finding salvation regardless of what he had done. And heaven knows how many people he perpetrated against. I don't know. But I do know that I can walk close enough to the Lord that he can say, look, that sucked. And it was a terrible thing to happen. And I didn't want that to happen to you. And I didn't want him to be so controlled by demonic behavior or sinful behavior that it would happen to anybody. But you need to know that I love you both, and I can't not love you both.
Yeah. I was just
That,
thinking, what a complex God. He has to love like he loves us both. He loves the sinner, he loves the saint, and he wants the sinner to be saved.
yeah,
And when the sinner hurts the saint, sometimes we think, but God, this should not have happened to me. But we have to remember he also loves this person over here.
right, right.
So
And I
my
think we have,
goodness.
I'm sorry, I think we just have to remember that when God says all things work together for good to those who love him and are called according to his purposes, he's not saying that all things are good.
Amen.
He's saying, he's saying he will not waste the sin
Not a thing.
in order to make things good. He will utilize all of that. Um, I know my coming to the cross involved my admissions of guilt and sin and the things that were happening that I had done to others before I got there. I had a shorter list, but then I allowed my abandonment and all of that to steer me toward immorality because then I was trying to get back at God for letting things happen to me, right? And he was still a God that forgave me, and I've asked him several times, you know what, Lord, I had no closure with my perpetrator. He died. I had no closure with my father, even though we tried, and I talk a lot about that in my podcast. Um, I never had any real restoration with him. It never happened. I would love to have had that. And I just asked the Lord, if there are people in my life that I really need to have some restoration with and go to and say, man, I really hurt you and that was wrong. Bring them in. Bring them to me. They need to see that you can burden me with that conviction, and I can make an attempt to restore. And he does. He does. And it's amazing to me that he cares enough about them to want restoration between me and them, and he cares enough about me to give me the opportunity to
Yep.
make things right. So,
I sat
ooh,
down one day and God gave me a list of people I needed to apologize to. And I said, done. Like,
was it as long as my list? I don't know. I'm older. I think I'm older. It's not as long as my list because I'm older.
so you don't have to get into the details of your father, but what was your relationship like with your father? Because you said that you had abandonment from your father, and that
Yeah.
age started at,
I was not quite two.
okay.
My mother, I don't have a lot of memories of my dad being around before I was 2 years old. He was a musician, played in a lot of bars and did a lot of country music stuff. Was in Nashville for a long time. I've been told his name's on the back of some albums that he did studio work in with Elvis and George Jones and some of those old country singers. Um, he never sought me out. My mom made it obvious where we were. She always communicated with his parents to let them know where we were. They did not reach out. Um, there was no relationship. My mom remarried a couple of times after that. Those were really hard relationships for me because I didn't want anybody trying to be my dad. And in one of those cases, I think the man really wanted to try and be my dad, but I was not in the headspace. And I did. I just blamed God for taking away my father, but I didn't realize until I tried to rebuild some relationships with my father in my 20s that God had really spared me. It would have been a nightmare to have lived with that man all of those years as my parent. It really would have. And he was abusive to my mother, so I'm quite sure that he had spared my mom by keeping him out of our lives. I have 9 siblings from 9 different women because that's how he lived. And one of them, she's about 9 years younger than me, and she and I are pretty close. I have a brother who was just a year younger than me. My mom was in the hospital room when he was delivered because she's just a good woman, and she was trying to help this poor girl out that was a groupie in the band. And and so I'm close to him. You know, he and I converse pretty much weekly and talk about stuff. But he was not raised with my father. My father only reached out to him when he needed money. And so he didn't have a real relationship with him either. None of us have. So by the time he passed away, I was the oldest daughter, oldest kid. And so I was the one that they called when he got to the point that he was on hospice care.
Did you have a relationship from your 20s to when he passed away?
I tried. Um, it got to the point that my kids were being hurt by him because he would lie about things and then not show up or come to birthday parties and I kind of had to make the decision to back off. And there was one particular situation that increased my bitterness toward him, and that was him and an ex-girlfriend in the hospital room lying to me about what had happened when I was a baby. I knew they were making stories up, and I just couldn't do it. I just like because when you're walking with the Lord, you're really sensitive to deception.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's around, it's like for me, it's probably the worst thing you can do is drag a lie on with me because the father of lies controls so much in my own life when I was younger. Now I'm really sensitive to it and it hurts. It's painful. And I just like so I had to make the decision probably when I was in my early 30s to just tell him I'm not coming to see you anymore if these are the kinds of conversations we're going to have. But I love you and I'm praying for you. And and then I just had to let him go. And so it was probably about 15 years went by before they called me and said, "Look, he's on hospice care and he needs somebody to come and make these decisions." So he'd already given his, all of his power of attorney stuff to a sister who didn't even live close by. But I would go and the day that he died, I walked in and his hospice nurse had left him practically naked in a very cold room, no sheets, no anything. And I was a nurse's aide, so I did my best to clean him up and get him cared for. And he was not coherent. He didn't know me at all. And I sat there for a while, and I don't know if it was just out of obligation or if I thought maybe at some point he'd wake up enough to tell me he was sorry. Because the last conversation I'd had with him was about, no, I've lived a good life and I wouldn't change a thing. And that was a little hard because my mom and I both were sitting there and go, and she looked at me and she said, "Really? You wouldn't change a thing?" She was kind of upset about that. And I just looked at her and I said, now I realize he probably just mentally couldn't. He just didn't have it. Like mentally he was not all there and it never dawned on him the kind of pain he was causing people. But I sat there with him that day, and that was the last day that he lived. He passed away that night. And I spent a lot of time talking to him and he couldn't talk back. Um, and I did have to ask him, why didn't you want me? I mean, it's taken a lot for me to get to a place where I realize I'm just a pretty good girl. I'm a good daughter. I was a misguided but pretty decent mom. I was I'm a pretty good grandma. I'm an entrepreneur. I love the Lord and I love people. I think I was probably would have been a pretty good daughter. And I never understood why he wouldn't want that. Why would he not want that? And it wasn't until after his death that I was spending some time alone with the Lord, and I just said, this still is painful to me. I don't know that I'm going to get to a place where I understand why I wasn't wanted. And it was then that the Lord said that I had never been fatherless because he has always been the father to the fatherless, and that he was rescuing me by allowing that man not to want me. And it didn't have anything to do with me. It didn't have anything to do with me or whether I was a good enough daughter, looked right, sounded right, lived right. Didn't matter. That was that man's problem. That was his lostness and his sinful choices. And I had to stop carrying his problem and making it my burden. And most children who get abandoned, whether it's through adoption or, divorce or, fathers just leave them and start a new family or whatever, they have to understand it might be God's way of protecting them. You just won't know that while it's happening. And now I can love him differently. I can love him like I love other lost people or unbelieving people. I can love him like a stranger. You got to love strangers. You got to love your enemies. So I can do that now, but I had to have the conversation, and it's okay to have that conversation. When people say they're afraid to ask God why, ask him.
Not me.
Either. I'm like, he's the one with the answers, and he never looks at me and goes, "Don't ask that." He doesn't look at my
Listen,
he doesn't look at my questions and go, "Well, that's stupid." He
now he
doesn't.
has said to me, he'll give me a second to process what I was feeling, my anger or my frustration or my sadness. And then he was like, when you finish, come out of that pit. Like
Don't be
basically,
camping there.
no, when you finish, come out of that pit. Like the way that God talks to us sometimes it's like, oh, pearl clutching. But
Hmm.
when you were talking about basically getting an opportunity to take care of your dad, I always look at situations like that and I think, God has given us an opportunity to see our own heart because there are times where mother or father passed away and we know that we had some kind of resentment or anger in our heart for them, and we don't have the opportunity to evaluate our heart to see, yes, I felt this in my heart for him, but I still loved him enough to make sure that they were okay. And I
Hmm.
always look at those situations as God giving us the opportunity to evaluate even our own heart, to know that, yeah, maybe you had some frustration in your heart for them, but the love was still there so that it's not questioned after the
Hmm.
fact. You know what I mean? So I always look at it that way.
Yeah.
But
Coming up on the next episode.
and so the discarded daughter, I want you to talk to us a little bit about that, everything that added up to that and what poured into it and what pours out of it.
How much time do we have, girl? I don't know.
Girl, keep going. We on part two. We on part two. It's okay.
Right? We can.
Hey, I hope that you enjoyed the episode. Make sure that you catch us every week here on the Kingdom Wife Mom Boss podcast, where we are bringing you new episodes, new content, new information, new empowerment, new strategies, and new strength. Until then, I'll catch you next time.